Have you ever enjoyed the nervous energy of a spontaneous pusher operation on a grade, or had coupler problems like we seem to be having here? Well, this video might be something you enjoy. This is Burr Stewart, and welcome to part 97 of my continuing series of operating videos on my HO scale Burrlington Northern model railroad. In this video, we're going to have a bizarre combination of coupler mishaps, a spontaneous pusher operation, and even a little construction updates. So let's get started. Well, the first thing we're going to do is celebrate the arrival of a new special express parcel service between London and Seattle, hauled by the Rat locomotive with 5 parcel cars trailing. Robin brought this train over, and I just had to show it to you. Here it's crossing the Squid Bridge and entering into the Bayside Yard. You can hear the squealer with its lovely railroad sound. As you probably know if you've watched this channel, we call what we're doing here reality model railroading, because even though you might claim that you're modeling the Burrlington Northern in 1973, which I do, your friends bring over other equipment to run, which we do. So you just have to live with it. Now, in this case, Scott was spotting a tank car at the oil depot and having a lot of trouble with the micro mark illuminated coupler pick. And see there, he got it off to the side instead of in the middle.
Steady my hands over.
So then when he pulled back, it was not uncoupled. So that's a shame. I think with those micro mark illuminated picks, you have to really file down the tip until it's really, really sharp. And then you have a chance of getting it in the right spot, right there in between the coupler heads. There we go. And if it was filed to a sharper point, it might not have flipped out that fast. Anyway, that oil depot was scratch built by Robin Peel. So if you wonder why I tolerate him bringing over all this OO scale equipment, it's because he also does a lot of really great stuff on the layout, including that beautiful scratch built depot. It's intended to be a model of or a replica of the Chama oil transfer platform in Chama, New Mexico. Of course, we relocated it here to Everett, but that's a longer story, which you've heard in other videos. Now, this Jeep that we're running, I recently put new super bright LEDs in both the headlights and the rotating beacon. And I'm really enjoying it because it just seems like you can follow the engine more easily.
That's all done, yeah.
Wait for it. Bang! Now notice that the two coupler heads did not actually click together. So he pulled away and he had to bang onto it even more in order to get it to work. And see, now he's testing it for the engine, moving it back, which is what you would always do, a stretch test before pushing it. And that has to do with safety and making sure that a car that doesn't have air pressure in the brake system doesn't just go rolling away. I really like the way these Milwaukee boxcars look, even if they're a little old by 1973, they still look great. Now he's stopping here to check out if the switch is lined. He needs to cross over to the main track in order to get into the Weyerhaeuser mill site in the background there. All appears to be well. I really like that Jeep. Now you'll notice there's a blue flag on the track that goes right to the Weyerhaeuser mill. But he's parking these two cars on an adjacent track which doesn't have any blue flag protection. So he was able to just run in there and drop these cars. Now, a few minutes later, he assembled everything in the Bayside Yard that needed to be taken over to Interbay, and he pulled a very long train completely ignoring the rule that we have here of one locomotive for every 10 cars. This is something like a 25-car cut. And while the route is mostly flat, there is a slight grade going up to the bridge number 4 in Ballard, as there is on the prototype. So we're going to see if he can make it into Interbay with just one engine and 25 cars. My guess is he won't be able to. We'll just have to see what happens here. This is the town of Mukilteo, and that front track there with the tank cars is the milepost yard. Now you can hear the squealer. And we're coming up to the Ballard station. Now he's having a little trouble pulling it. This is a 90-degree curve to the left with a 180-degree curve to the right. So the curvature also adds to the traction problem for the locomotives, as you probably know. So far, so good. There's still a little bit of train left. The grade is uphill until you get to that bridge there in the distance. We're slowing down now. He has the engine on pretty high throttle setting. And there's that Penn Central boxcar that I'm fond of. We'll talk about that later. But see, we're stalled. We are dead in the water, and he hasn't made it to Interbay. So being a railroader, he's probably going to do something semi-realistic. We'll see. Looks like he's backing up the train now because he can't get into the yard with that grade. So sure enough, he backed all the way back to the Mukilteo area and decided to really make a run for it at full speed to see if he could get the speed of the train up enough to get around that fancy S-curve. This is the engine at full speed, which on my layout is about 30 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Will it work? That's the question. Oh, what's that? Well, Dave brought over a brand new locomotive that he just received and was breaking it in on the other main track. So what we need is Dave's engine assisting.
You want to assist, Dave?
Assisting?
Yep. And I realized that what we needed to do was have Dave's engine push Scott's train from the back and get it into Interbay. And we could have done other things, I suppose. We could have hitched an engine to the front of the train to help pull it or something else, but I'm often looking for the quickest way out of a situation. And this was definitely a situation. Scott wanted to get that train into Interbay, and the only way we were going to do it was to add an engine somehow. Now this gave us a chance to enjoy a foreign locomotive that not only is completely out of era, being a modern locomotive rather than a 1973 era locomotive, but it also, of course, it comes from the completely opposite side of the country, and we don't see these too often. Now here we've reached the end of double track, and we need to flip that switch in order to move from main 2 over to main 1. See the switch I flipped? And there you can see the switch points moved over, controlled by a tortoise switch machine motor. Now in modern times, I sometimes do see a CSX locomotive on a BNSF consist going through Carkeek Park, but we're not trying to model the modern era. We're trying to model 1973, but Obviously, you'll have to suspend that for the moment because we're using this modern locomotive to shove a 1973 train. This is what I mean by reality model railroading. We just do what's convenient, fun, or expedient. Meanwhile, that is one gorgeous locomotive, isn't it? Now here we're going to have a serious coupler alignment problem because we have a long wheelbase engine and a very short wheelbase caboose. So these couplers aren't even aligning, which means on the prototype, if something like this happened, it would have destroyed the caboose. Look at that. It's not even touching the coupler. Bang! Oh, smash is more like it. So I didn't show you on the video, but I went ahead and attached those two couplers by hand. And he started pushing on the back of this train. And so we have Dave controlling the rear engine and Scott controlling the front engine. And
Another notch there, Dave.
And you hear them talking to each other about
Cars go
how much to
train like this little
push on the train so that we don't derail and we keep it moving. It's pretty scary to take a train this long through this much of an S-curve with one engine on each end. This is called suspense. Will it derail or will we make it into Interbay? Meanwhile, you've got to love the squealer sounds, aren't they great? And the speaker's right under the layout here, so you can hear it pretty well. I love those Canadian barrel ore cars. I saw them many times going through downtown Seattle when I worked down there. So I know this is prototypical, even though it's 1973. So I'm not sure they were using them in the United States that early. But again, this is reality model railroading. We want to run those cars, so we're going to do it. It's not that much of a stretch. It's a stretch, but it could be worse. I mean, at least we prohibit Conrail equipment here. We don't do Conrail because the Conrail was in 1976, not 1973. So far, so good. He's made it farther than he made it before. You probably won't see that engine over here again because Dave can run it on his own modern era layout. He doesn't need to bring it over here. But it is a thing of beauty. And also notice the backdrop down on the deck below, how well that turned out. I think I showed that to you in a previous video, but that's downtown Seattle across the water from West Seattle. And that's going to really be fun to operate down there. It's going to be a sit-down job, which I know some of my operators will really appreciate. There's that Penn Central boxcar again. And there is the Interbay yard, engine terminal on the left, maintenance away on the right in front, and the Seattle skyline in the far distance down there. Well, this pusher operation seems to have been a success. What we have to do now is uncouple it from the train. I guess we can go down there and take a look at that. There's a car repair shed there on the right.
Stop right there, Dave. Thank you for your assistance.
How did that work? How did we get through all these S-curves and crossovers?
without derailing this thing.
Dave is just elated with that pusher operation.
That's how the train was made, I guess. Little bitty caboose.
But not so much the uncoupling job. Sometimes there's nothing you can do but re-rail the car by hand.
When you want to, you cut away.
Yeah, I got a lot of momentum factory built into this engine.
And then it'll go on to further duties at his house. Very nice. Well, we got this far. Let's do a little brief construction update. Robin and Dave were working on this monster road grade crossing, and I was mixing up ballast, as you see here, so that we can ballast it properly. And we don't have the ballast in yet, but we did want to test those grade crossings, which they scratch built out of strip wood, glued down with a little Aliens tacky glue. And you can see a little bit of a white styrene strip underneath the strip wood to make sure everything stays level. Well, that was brilliant. I mean, that train went right through there. It didn't catch the coupler trip pin. It didn't stall. It just went right through there. There's no bumping. That's what you call a successful test. Now, granted, we'll have to do it again after we ballast the track, but it shouldn't be too bad. Now, here's an opportunity to show you how the switch points work when you use a Caboose Industries ground throw, if you haven't noticed this. See, we're going to flip that over, and the switch points flipped from the right to the left side, and that will cause the train now to take the other track. I assume you know that, but once in a while I'll have somebody come visit the layout who has never thought about how a track switch works. So if you're one of those people, I hope you'll rewind the video and watch that a couple more times until it's obvious. Yeah, that looks good. And I hope you've enjoyed it, and you look at the other videos of my channel. And for now, this is Burr Stewart wishing you much fun with trains.
Who's the dispatcher on that? Well, I don't know. Who could that dispatcher possibly be on that British train?